Do you hear me? Is this working? Okay, cool. Are you still okay? You know, because this morning we have very various sessions in the row. So I'm not the last one, but almost. So thank you for your attention. I'm Bruno, and as Ismail mentioned, I'm in AXWAY. AXWAY is mostly developing, digital enablement, and mostly focused in the digital engagement in ecosystems. So not very surprising that I'm here to share our perspective and vision. And I'm very original. I'm going to talk about PSD2. You know what it is, right? So I'm going to be quite quick on a couple of slides. Here is what I would like to share with you. Firstly, to share a few perspectives and different perspectives on PSD2. Then I would like to focus on the key building blocks that any financial services institution will have to deal with. And well, we'll focus on security. This is something that when we're talking about APIs, we are always talking about the data models, about the standards and things like this. Not much about security, so let's make a quick focus on that. And well, the overall perspective around security, which is, when considering things globally, kind of brings some complexities. And so what is, I believe, important. So firstly, I would like to share our experience. Actually, and here is a very short story. I remember in February this year, I was in San Francisco and discussing with US banks. And suddenly into a conference, one of a small bank here in the US was talking about PSD2. I said, well, where I am? I'm in San Francisco, talking with a local bank in California, and they are talking of PSD2. Wow, that's impressive. And the reason why is that they were considering, oh, that's a very interesting way the regulators in Europe are setting up a level playing field for the banks. Should be very helpful here in the US. Wow, that's interesting. I need to share that with my European colleagues and friends. Okay, what happens, at the same time there was the HMT that has been issued, the Open API standards, which were going one step further than the PSD2, as Christophe just mentioned. And more interestingly, end of last year and beginning in May, as well as in August, the CMA in UK has been issuing their order, like somebody yesterday mentioned and explained, well, to open account information through APIs. So basically, all this, well, I thought, well, we need to have a global perspective on PSD2 and not stuck on PSD2 itself, but let's talk about open banking. And what is the perspective as of 2016 of the banks worldwide on open banking and PSD2? Yes, for the European guys. And we end up with, working with Finextra in order to make a survey. And this survey is available. Please, if you are interested, let me know. I will send it a copy. But here are the quick findings. And I'm not going to go into deep detail because please read this survey. This is really interesting. PSD2 suddenly becomes strategic for banks, most of the banks. The second point is very interesting. We are always talking about the customer experience improvement, right? In digital, this is something we've been saying again. What about the corporate? The corporate has been lagging, corporate banking, has been lagging for years on their digital strategy. You know that, right? By the way, who is bank in the room? Okay, maybe I'm going to be killed outside of this room. Anyway, suddenly with PSD2, corporate bankings realize, oh, okay, there are some strategies we can set up with open banking and PSD2 in particular. So there is more and more, perspective from a corporate perspective, what can we do in order to eventually help the customer of a bank. Play your roles. This is one of the things we find in this survey is that suddenly the banks, not only the banks, but at least the banks, are thinking of their role into the ecosystem. And suddenly stopping thinking about pushing their own product to the end customer, but thinking more in the shoes of their customer. And maybe in the customer of their customer. Very interesting. Obviously, it fosters API technology, even though in PSD2 per se, except for PISP, API is not mentioned. API technology is certainly the #1 technology that is to be used in order to share information, and almost nobody in the world are, saying something different than that. And it comes the questions about open APIs and standards. And in standards, one of the good thing with standards is that, or with PSD2 generally speaking, is that it has been maybe accelerating some countries, like here in UK with CMA, in order to launch through, let's say, ecosystem. Well, we can discuss about the size of the ecosystem, but through ecosystem discussions, in order to come to something that is, let's say, largely recognized as a standard to go to. This is, as Christophe mentioned just before me, this is not the case within the regulation itself. But as an ecosystem standard, an industry standard, maybe we will come to a conclusion, and that's good. Having said that, I would like to share this with you. And this is something, when we launched a survey, it was something like 10 days ago in Geneva at Cybos. We had discussed quite in length about this. Actually, when we think about ecosystem approach, we should stop thinking about disintermediation, re-intermediation. All these things are interesting, but this is only looking at interaction, a portion of the interaction which is a one-to-one interaction within something which needs to be seen holistically. And when you think of the open standards, when you are a bank or whoever you are in the ecosystem, you need to think about all the connections that you can build and all the business value you can do. Maybe you can feel being disintermediated and going to lose this part of the revenue that you were having before. But the distribution is changing. The world is changing, And what happens in order to eventually improve the customer experience that may not be your own customer, you need to think about the B4B strategy, not a B2B. It's no more linear. You need to think of the business of your customer. You need to develop a platform that will enable making business for business. No more business to business. Okay, I think this is really important because, again, we can talk and talk again about disintermediation risk and re-intermediation strategies. What's this? Think holistically on the ecosystem. Okay. Having said that, well, API first strategy, something our friend from PwC has been developing earlier this morning. What I would like to share is that PSD2 is European. Well, to some extent, it's not only European because the two legs, the one leg payment will have to cope with the PSD2. So it's not only European. But if you step a bit, farther, let's say, you will think about open banking, and you will think about the ecosystem in world ecosystem into which you are playing a game. And, think about the financial institutions, how they operate, and what can be done out of the box. Second thing, what is interesting is what are the banks doing? And if I would say there are three categories. Some of the banks are saying, let's wait and see. The standards are not here, we are not clear, the RTS has not issued something, and whatever happens, it will not be either technical nor standard. So let's wait and see. Some banks are like this. Some of us are saying, wow, that's great. Let's go to the ecosystem, and yeah, we need to practice and to test and learn. Well, this is, to my opinion, the best way to learn and to cope with what is going to be built. Nothing is already set into stone. And remember, digital economy is about uncertainty, and you need to be confident that in this uncertain world, you will be able to, well, maybe to build new ways of doing and new ways of developing value proposition. Leaders are there, but not much. And in the middle, you have banks that feels, well, we need to be ready, and at least let's be ready in setting up an API-first strategy, mostly internal, in order to provide agility of our information system, so that when something is ready or come up, we will be ready to be part of a game. APIs and open APIs are clearly the enablers. Some are talking about APIs like products, and some of our customers are really leveraging our technology in order to build the products, and they have been putting trademarks on their APIs, and this is, I think, very, very interesting ways. However, API is not the magic wand. It's not just because you will have defined APIs, even, along the standards that are from different perspectives being crafted, that you will be, part of a game. You need to have a strategy behind, and you need to think beyond the APIs in the business model you want to go to. Also, because of the subject of this morning is more about uncertainty, all these brilliant ideas or, let's say, pink way of looking at what PSD2 can bring and open banking can bring. Think about security. And, when we talk about API standards and things like this, we are more on the data models, we are more on the method to access, or what can we do, things like this. But we are not enough talking about security, I believe. This I think if you want to leverage open banking, or PSD2 in particular, from a bank perspective, it is obviously to provide new services to your end customer. Like here, this is a very quite simple examples, or simplistic example of PFM would bring to not only to leverage the, let's say, if you are preferred bank, not only to leverage the services of preferred bank, but to leverage some of the services of the ecosystem you can integrate in order to help your own customer. This is a part of the equation. Sometimes the customer is not directly your customer. It might be somewhere here. Anyway, in order to do this, and not to detail all the drawing here, what is important is that you have different kind of APIs, REST or not REST APIs. Some with internal, some external, some with your mobile channels, okay? What's important is that there are key capabilities that need to be built in order to enable those things. And if we are business-oriented or service-oriented, what you will concentrate on is the channels, especially the mobile channel, to deliver a service, which services in terms of data that you may have, but also the combination of what your ecosystem or your integration to the ecosystem can bring together with your own in order to deliver services at the end. Okay. Also, what is very important is to provide visibility, how, who, and in which circumstances the services are used. But in order to enable all this, you need that, which is security. And there are two aspects of this. What happens in real time, what happens in the onboarding. And onboarding is particularly important because you need to make it quick and you need to make it secure. So if we focus on those two things, well, this is a no-brainer for all of you, I believe. If Mr. John here, could be Bruno, could be whoever, wants to leverage his or her different banks account, they will need in the middle something that make it simpler to go and leverage what is on their accounts. And obviously in the middle, we will need something that will at least aggregate the ability to connect those banks and provide security. Well, on top of this, there will be supervision, but that's not the subject of this morning. This is a no-brainer, I believe. If we look at the onboarding process, and well, here is a very quick demo just to figure out what it is. At least if preferred bank on the top, which is one of the bank of John, has provided an access like, the open, the OAuth coupled with OpenID Connect standards, once he has created his own profile on the intermediary, let's say, platform, then he can, and here, well, this is a bit slow compared to the time which is left to me. Anyway, what he will propose is the way to, to share, not only to be authenticated and to get the token from preferred bank to do something, but also to which extent he will be, authorized to do what. And this is the method for preferred bank. But what happens is the others, oops, is this working? No. We are restarting from beginning. So I'm going to go quicker to the end of this. Yes. What is important is to understand that the other banks may not have this same approach and preferred bank to be authenticate and to provide a token. And to some extent, some banks may not have such mechanism in place. So from the middleman perspective here, you need to streamline those different approach in order to be able, at the end, to provide access and visibility on the accounts of the various banks, whatever security method they have been providing. Going to move. Okay. So if we focus on the security issues that we are talking about here, here is a range of the various security domain one need to go through. It's about certification, it's about data integrity, it's also about transport security. But I would like to focus on two things. One is about threat mitigation, and the other one is about access. Let's start with threat mitigation. And here is a report, maybe you have seen that. This is a report that has been done by Ovum in terms of security. The funny thing and the very interesting thing is that we can think that, the banks or the organizations, generally speaking, have been putting in place threat mitigation. And a very simple one, which is rate limiting. What do you provide in terms of features in order to make sure that you are limiting the rate and, minimizing the threat of being overloaded on your system? Very surprisingly, only 45% of our interviewees, and this is all sectors, are effectively setting up with their API strategy this kind of limitation, while almost 90% have a digital strategy and have in place APIs in order to access from outside world to the system and services. Very interesting. Well, hopefully, there was not that much banks inside. So hopefully, all the guys in the room here feel very comfortable about it. Let's see about access control. And this might be obvious for everyone, but what needs to be authenticated and authorized is organizations. Okay, this is the bank, but this is the partners also. This is the TPP when talking about PSD2. The apps itself, and the individuals. And what is interesting is that individuals can grant access to third-party providers that eventually will do something on your bank account. Okay? There are key capabilities to implement. This is obviously, identity access management connectivity, and there are many solutions in this that we need at one point of time to be able to connect with. There are standards. We have been talking quite in length about OAuth and a little bit less about OpenID Connect, but these are open standards. There are also various alliances leveraging those standards in order to build something that can be, shared across communities. We have talked about FIDO, or maybe not today, but FIDO. I've seen on some slides about FIGO, which is another one, just one letter difference, but different solution, different approach. Not talking about these national systems. I think yesterday we talked about Bank ID in Sweden as well as the same name in Norway. We talked about the Danish portal. There are others. Whatever happened is that, do we think that there will be any standard to rely upon in order to make this happen in a short or medium term? Well, I believe you know the response. However, so what? Well, I think first, when discussing with banks, that the KIC regulation, know your customer regulation, are still on the bank side. And to some extent, I think that's good, that some liability should be associated to the data the bank are owning on the customer. And liability to make the connections between an electronic identity and a physical identity still lies on the bank. And this is not only something that they need to bear, it's an asset. Let's look at this as an asset. The other point is that there is no specific standard that will be imposed on authorization and authentication. So yes, this is a threat to some extent. At the same time, it's a way to move forward and to let the industry, define something. Back to my first point at the beginning, banks outside Europe consider PSD2 as helping the industry to set up a level playing field. Let's think about it. It's not me saying it, it's banks outside Europe. First thing is that we'll have to cope with the various methods of identification and identity management, generally speaking. So, in other words, the financial services organization will have to have a platform approach in order to integrate the ecosystem to be able to be flexible enough to cope with these various points. From our perspective, if we look at the ecosystem like being consumers or end consumers as well as partners, in the middle and really focusing on security issues, there are several things. What are the services that will be shared through APIs? The consumer registry, who is, authorized, authenticated, or have the ability to be authenticated to use what? What are the methods and how we measure the SLAs? Implementing the threat protection, which seems to be basic, but are not, and needs to be done at the API level. I mean, at the edge of the enterprise, up front. Down to which level of API, that's another question. And on top of this, we need analytics, and we need analytics real time. We are in the digital world. We cannot spend months before analyzing something or over. And end-to-end agility means that we need to make this happen from design, having the ability, well, this is some extract of our AXWAY tool, but let's forget about the AXWAY tool for a moment. We need to be able to map very simple orchestration schemes in order to articulate various policies to make the security happen. We need to see that from a technical perspective and to see real time what is going on. And at the same time, we need to provide the business view on what happens, meaning that whatever policy, whatever filter, whatever information is used, this needs to be seen in a way which is understandable from a technical perspective as well as from a business perspective. With that, I want to thank you. I've been a bit longer, maybe 2 minutes. Okay.